King, Hercule Satan, Reigen Arataka. These guys make up the Mount Rushmore of anime frauds. And speaking of frauds, let me ask you something. Do you ever feel like a fraud? Getting way too personal at the top, I know, but the question is an important one to ask yourself when talking about what I believe is the most underrated trope in anime, one that's produced some truly memorable, likable, and most importantly, relatable characters. This type of character is the embodiment of max aura. They rolled a 20 on charisma and luck, being able to perform some truly incredible feats through sheer reputation alone, and a whole lot of assumptions made by other people. They've done the impossible, essentially turning hearsay into the strongest weapon in anime, and is usually their only weapon. That's because the fraudulent character tends to, in reality, be the exact opposite of what everyone around them believes them to be. Think of characters like, I don't know, King from One Punch Man, Reigen Arataka from Mob Psycho 100, and Hercule Satan from Dragon Ball. Well, turns out this video is about these exact three characters. Small world. In all seriousness though, these three guys are perfect examples of what makes the fraudulent character so entertaining, admittedly sometimes frustrating, but ultimately endearing. That's because although these fellas love to lie like a rug to get by, they often show up at the most important moments and somehow save the day by doing the simplest of things, something just a regular person could do, embodying the strength of the human spirit, and most importantly, delivering a message that says, hey, I'm not very special and you might not be either, but look at what's possible anyway. That's a message that I think resonates with a lot of people, including myself. So that's what's justifying this 30-minute or so video, where I dive deep into three fictional anime characters that pretty much are just regular dudes. But I promise it'll at least be a decent time. So let's get into it. So let's circle back to that question I asked at the very top. Do you ever feel like a fraud? Don't worry, you don't gotta answer that question quite yet, but this is a question King from One Punch Man has never asked himself. And that's because he's known from day one that he was indeed a fraud, but not by his own choice, at least not at first. In the series, King is introduced as an S-class hero with an imposing presence, giving the implication that he's a truly strong opponent, especially considering he's known as the strongest man on Earth. Being ranked above heroes like, let's say, Flashy Flash and Watchdog Man that can take down hordes of monsters in seconds, you would assume he's performed some truly incredible feats as a hero to be placed above them, right? Well, that's the magic of the King aura, because it turns out that not only is he just a regular guy, he's also considerably more cowardly than the average person. In his own words, he's a coward 10 times over. We come to find out that King is simply a victim of being in the right place at the right time, or the wrong place at the wrong time if you ask him. For some reason, he's always been a magnet for disasters, having demon and dragon level threats pop up around him on a regular. When Saitama realizes that King isn't who people say he is, he asks him why he's even carrying on this ruse to begin with. King goes on to explain that he never wanted all this fame and recognition in the first place. He would always just inadvertently be given credit for the heroic deeds performed by Saitama, so much so that he was commuted to being an S-class hero without having to take any of the tests that are normally required. This kicked off an avalanche of gossip and rumors where people started to take the feats he didn't even accomplish in the first place and blew them out of proportion, like way out of proportion, to the point that people started fabricating their own fantastical stories about him, like how he once went back in time to destroy a meteor that would have wiped out the human race.
That makes sense!
Meaning King is literally the reason humans even exist right now.
I did it! I saved the world!
Needless to say, his reputation has gotten way out of hand, so much so that the pressure to maintain a larger-than-life image that continuously grows more and more out of control as time goes on forces King to remain silent, for fear of being hated and shunned for lying to everyone. He even said he didn't want to admit anything to the Hero Association after they granted him his S-class status because he didn't want to disappoint them, which I think plays into the overall theme of this video, but we'll get to that in a bit. Even after admitting all this, Saitama doesn't hold any resentment towards him, and tells him that either way people look up to him as a symbol of strength and peace, so actually becoming strong can easily solve his problem. Although that's a much taller task than he makes it out to be, at its essence, he's telling him just fake it till you make it. That's a philosophy someone we'll be talking about in a bit really ran with. But for King, the impact that these words from Saitama would have is more subtle but very much evident as the series goes on. For example, when Elder Centipede was continuing his rampage after Bang, Bomb, and Genos failed to take him down, Saitama had King bring the monster's attention to him, so he could sneak in and take care of it. Before meeting Saitama, he would have hightailed it out of there like he normally does. Instead, he decided he wanted to at least try to be strong, by being the bait and calling a behemoth dragon level monster towards him. In reality, he didn't do anything but troll a monster, but at the end of the day, him doing this helped save countless lives. See, this moment was a bit of a turning point for King's character. Although he was still a coward that let his reputation carry him to safety whenever possible, he started weaponizing this very reputation, pretty much turning it into its own superpower on its own. This was put on full display in hilarious fashion throughout the Monster Association arc. We'd see his aura power take effect on a smaller scale, when he stumbled across who he thought was Waganma, but was really a shape-shifting monster looking to get the jump on him. However, King starts telling Monster Waganma to stay away from him because he'd be safer hanging around a hero that can actually protect him. However, from the monster's perspective, it thinks that King is seeing right through his trap and panics. This causes the monster's form to break down, and the bones the monster had formed to turn into Waganma had actually pierced his vital organs, killing it instantly. This comical encounter is just a microcosm of why King is who he is in the first place. Everyone around him just makes a whole lot of assumptions. This is how his reputation spiraled out of control. And this isn't the only time we see a monster essentially defeat themselves in the presence of King. It even happens against insanely strong dragon level monsters, like in the case of Homeless Emperor. In the height of the battle between the S-Class and the Monster Association cadre, things were not looking good for the heroes. Their biggest weapon, Tatsumaki, was completely exhausted, and the rest of the S-Class was in similar shape. On the other hand, extremely powerful monsters like Golden S, Evil Natural Water, and Homeless Emperor were just getting warmed up. Seeing that his fellow heroes were about to be killed, King springs into action at the perfect moment. The King engine roars as he stands on the edge of a cliff looking over the battlefield. As we know, the King engine is going crazy because he's currently shitting his pants in fear, but to the monsters, it's a warning they can't ignore. The strongest hero is here, and the remaining cadre are his targets. Because of this, the monsters decide they need to focus solely on King and work together, but are hesitant to make the first move due to the mystery behind his strength. The first one to step up is Homeless Emperor, who straight up charges up a spirit bomb to test King's fabled strength. However, just before he releases the attack, King calmly tells him to look where he's standing, explaining that releasing the attack on such unstable footing is extremely dangerous. In his mind though, the human monster starts to overthink to the absolute extreme, and deduces that he needs to read between the lines to really understand what King is trying to tell him. What he came up with in his panic was that King was in fact testing him, and he meant that he could easily evade the attack, and that he should think twice before releasing it over unstable ground, because he wouldn't be able to evade King's devastating counterattack. The amount of mental gymnastics you have to go through to get to that conclusion is honestly that's just what King does to people. This comical misunderstanding freezes him up long enough for Zombie Man to burst out of the ground and take care of him for good. On top of that, when King was backed into a corner and had no choice but to use his ultimate move that didn't exist, the Hellfire Wave Burst Motion Cannon or something like that, he performed it at the exact moment Garo showed up to actually take care of business. Garo does his damage in mere fractions of a second, making it seem like it was King's attack that made the blast. Even though he didn't really do anything, it can't be denied that him showing up when he did is the reason most of the S-Class is still alive. When Saitama finally arrives, King pretty much melts right in front of him, finally taking a sigh of relief, knowing that the real strongest man on Earth is finally here to save the day. He breaks down in front of Saitama talking about how scared he was, but how he still tried to do everything he could. This is followed by him noticing that Genos is watching, leading King to go back to his stone cold demeanor. However, this moment always stuck out to me, because this is when I realized how unironically incredible King was in this arc. I mean, he saved Terio and brought him to the surface, allowing Tatsumaki to go all out, knowing there were no more hostages. He also single-handedly turned the tide of the entire battle by simply being him. He keeps Tatsumaki safe after she's down for the count, amidst the world falling apart around him, and he even saves Garo by calling off the tank top crew after seeing that Terio was begging them to stop. No matter how you spin it, King was a true hero through and through in this arc, and that's especially incredible, considering, again in case we forgot, he's just a normal dude. By any metric, he had grown into a true hero, putting his own safety and fear aside for the greater good. But the journey for this Riz Lord doesn't end here. After the battle, King still seems to have severe anxiety from all the attention his reputation brings. For that reason, he seeks out Bang to help him become truly strong. However, Bang turns him away, reasoning that King would just be wasting his time considering how strong he already was. This starts a mission of King seeking and getting turned down by every major dojo out there, none of them wanting to go near him. When he sees Saitama later that day, he breaks down again and explains how he can't take the stress anymore, and he sees no way to fix the situation since no one will help him get strong. To this, Saitama gives King some advice that I think we can all kind of benefit from in general, but has a deeper meaning than you think. He looks at King and simply says, "Dude, just lift," and that's it. Pretty simple yet useful advice, but why I think it meant more for King in particular is because this was Saitama essentially telling him to quit looking for others to help make him strong. Do it on your own. Learn to grow stronger yourself. See, the problem with King was that he always cared way too much about what other people thought. That's why he was in the situation he was in the first place, because again, he accepted the S-Class invitation because he didn't want to disappoint anyone, so he just kept up the ruse. You might call him cowardly or spineless for thinking like this. I mean, he probably wouldn't disagree, but can you really blame him? In our icky real world, expectations are placed on us all the time by all sorts of people, but none of them have to deal with the mental toll of those expectations but yourself. It's hard to live up to what people expect of you, and in the process of building up all that stress that it causes, you start to build a less and less attainable version of yourself in your mind that you constantly compare your real self to, leading to feelings of being a failure or a fraud, no matter how accomplished you really are. This is what makes King such a tweaker all the time, on top of being a straight up coward. He's crippled by expectations, but thankfully it seems like he's making his way out of that through old-fashioned exercise and hard work. His story's not over yet since One Punch Man is still ongoing, but I have no doubt that he'll get to where he wants to be soon. However, for our next guy, he's already completed the journey that King's currently on right now, and he eventually went on to beat the fraud allegations and straight up save the entire universe, with some help. That man is none other than Hercule Satan. Now, full disclosure, Mr. Satan holds a special place in my heart. He's the first anime character I remember growing up that I legitimately thought was actually funny, and every time he popped up in an arc, I knew I was in for a good time. You could say that I fell under the very same spell that the rest of the world did in Dragon Ball. In his world, Hercule Satan is bigger than Taylor Swift, Mr. Beast, and Jesus Christ combined, and you could argue that still wouldn't be enough to represent just how loved he is by his own people. He's known by all as the World Martial Arts Champion and the Protector of Earth. Now, the first title he earned fair and square. He did in fact compete in the World Martial Arts Tournament and won it by legitimately fighting his way to the finals and winning. Sure, he had some lucky breaks on the way, like his opponent getting sick and the Z fighters not participating, but it was enough to rightfully earn him the title of champion. That's what separates Hercule from King. He can actually back up his reputation to a certain extent. It's when we get into the whole world's protector stuff that we see Satan run into some trouble. See, being recognized as the strongest and becoming a celebrity convinced Hercule that he could literally beat anyone. So when Cell announced the Cell Games, he announced that he would be participating right away, knowing that it would bring him even more fame and money. However, we all know how that ends up going. Satan gives it all he has, but Cell simply flicks him away, and then Goku steps up, starting the real tournament. Even after being clearly outmatched, Satan keeps up the delusion that he has any chance against Cell and refuses to fight him, citing stomach pain as the reason he's watching from the sideline. This is when Satan really gains the title of fraud, because to that point, he was calling himself the strongest because he technically was. He was the biggest fish in a small pond, but still the biggest nonetheless. So instead of learning some humility, he just kept up the act and lied through his teeth. That being said though, he does have his own shining moment in this arc that in my opinion puts him on the path to becoming the real champion of Earth. After Cell destroys Android 16's body, the severed head of 16 lands near the area where Mr. Satan and the TV crew are hiding. He then implores them to carry him over to Gohan. Putting aside his fear, and low-key looking to save face in front of the news crew, Satan agrees to bring the head of Android 16 to Gohan. This sets in motion the sequence of events, ultimately responsible for unleashing Gohan's hidden power, and beating Cell. Now I know he's not the one that beat Cell himself like he claims to have done in the press conferences afterwards, but you can't deny he played an important role. But that doesn't fully redeem him from actively taking all the credit and boosting himself to the title of Earth's protector. See, what's interesting about comparing characters like Mr. Satan to King is that although they're both considered frauds to certain extents, the things that get them to that status is completely different. For King, fame and admiration was something he never actively looked for. It kind of just happened, and he keeps up the ruse to not be hated. Hercule, on the other hand, actively seeks out the fame and admiration, joining the fighting tournament and winning, then attempting to fight and beat Cell. Their fraudulent behavior looks different, but the cool thing is, they both have similar journeys and character arcs that carry the same message. You don't need to be special to do special things. Years later, Hercule is still riding the high of the Cell games, and is more rich and famous than ever. He's living it up, with his teenage daughter Videl, who started to build some resentment towards her dad because of what all this popularity has done to him. His ego has grown out of control by this point, and he even stopped training in martial arts. This is the point in his career where you can truly call him a fraud, because although he's a capable fighter, or at least he was, he's living a full-on lie at this point. I mean, even his own daughter wanted him to lose in the next fighting tournament just so he could learn a little humility. After the World Martial Arts Tournament was interrupted by Spopovich and Yamu's attack on Gohan, Mr. Satan is set to fight in a 4-way battle against Android 18, Killa, Jewel, and Mighty Mask. Android 18, who does not want the fame of winning, agrees to throw the fight if Satan pays her 20 million zenny, which is double the prize money. To this, Hercule immediately agrees. This moment showed just how much Hercule cares about his own reputation. He'd hand over a fortune without question, if it meant being loved by the people. By this point, Mark seems like a pretty irredeemable character. Oh yeah, apparently his real name's Mark. That was kinda weird to find out, but anyway. Well, I'm happy to say that it doesn't stay like that. He does come quite redeemable soon enough, and honestly one of my favorite characters in the entire Buu saga. After Majin Buu kills Babidi and starts terrorizing the Earth, Mr. Satan is sent to his house to kill the monster. He tries to do so by giving Buu poisonous chocolates and a bomb disguised as a video game. These attempts prove to be so ineffective that Buu doesn't even register the fact that he's trying to kill him. Eventually, he tricks Majin Buu into posing for a photo, making it look like Satan defeated Buu, when really he ends up becoming a servant. While Mr. Satan plans to use a super explosive bomb to try and kill Majin Buu returns early from a killing spree with an injured puppy, showing signs of good in him. Seeing this glimmer of kindness, Hercule ends Majin Buu's murderous rampage by simply asking him to stop. It's crazy to think that to that point, no Z-Fighter and no weapon on the planet could do what Hercule just did, and he did it by being the real Hercule Satan for once. Just a regular guy with infectious charisma, and apparently a pretty kind heart. Mr. Satan and Majin Buu then form a true friendship, and name the puppy B. They all spend time together like a weird little family of sorts, and Hercule drops any intention of trying to take him out. However, you know that when things are all good and sweet in an anime, there is always some douche with an Australian accent that comes in and just fucks everything up. Two criminals named Smitty and Van Zant try ambushing them to take out Buu and collect the reward money, resulting in their puppy being shot. Seeing this, and in a surprising moment, Hercule takes the men on, even though they have weapons. In one of the best Hercule Satan moments in the entire series, he goes on to beat the dog shit out of Van Zant. My boy Hercule brought fists to a gunfight and said bet. He takes him out easily, showing that Mr. Satan is still a damn good fighter, and can be a true hero when he needs to be. He's later shot by the same thugs himself, leading Buu to go into an uncontrollable rage that causes him to expel his evil essence into a new being called Evil Buu. He saves Hercule, but ends up being eaten by the new evil version of himself and becomes Super Buu. From here until the end of the Buu saga, Mr. Satan has a few important bits here and there, but his true shining moments come close to the end. When Kid Buu finally succeeds in destroying the Earth, Mr. Satan, Dende, and B are rescued at the last minute to the sacred world of the Kai. At first, Satan thinks it's all a dream, but changes his mind when he realizes that he can't fly, and also when Kid Buu shows up and resumes the battle against Goku and Vegeta. During the battle, Mr. Satan gets angry and tries to take Kid Buu himself head on. This is the very same Kid Buu that just gave Super Saiyan 3 Goku the business a minute ago. He obviously had no shot of winning, much like in the Cell games, but this time around, there's a crucial difference that really highlight how far he's come as a character. In the Cell games, Hercule took on Cell out of his own delusion and ego, not accepting that there was anyone out there stronger than him, even after being flicked away like a mosquito. Here, however, you could argue there's still a little bit of delusion involved, but Hercule knows damn well he's too weak to win this one, but he tries anyway. He sees how dire the situation is and fights anyway. Just when Kid Buu is about to kill Mr. Satan, he hesitates and starts to scream loudly, holding his head in agony, and then spits out an unconscious Good Buu, who turned out to be what was stopping Kid Buu from harming Mr. Satan. He buys very valuable time for Goku to recover and saves a friend. That's a pretty damn good job, but it doesn't end there. When Goku charges up a final spirit bomb to finish Kid Buu off, the people of Earth become extremely reluctant to help by sharing their energy, making it impossible to charge the bomb up enough to take out Buu. This is when the hero of Earth steps up. He becomes genuinely angry that people of Earth were refusing to believe them, and decides to do what he does best: turn the Riz levels up to 100 and speak to the people directly. He tells them that he needs the energy to fight Kid Buu himself, and of course after hearing that, all of Earth pitches in without question. And that's the true power of Hercule Satan. This is what truly makes him the champion of Earth. To his people, he embodies hope and the strength of the human spirit. I mean, here we have a human fighting a cosmic battle against universe-ending threats, and still he managed to find a way to steal MVP of this arc. When Goku hesitates to throw the spirit bomb at Kid Buu for fear of also hitting an injured Vegeta, Good Buu holds Kid Buu down while Mr. Satan carries Vegeta's body aside, ordering Goku to fire. This earns him respect from Goku, who calls him a real hero, and it's well deserved. My boy Mark went from a spineless, egomaniacal idiot to a slightly less spineless, not so egomaniacal idiot. Now that's growth, if you ask me. Jokes aside though, Hercule and King both eventually embody an important theme that I think can resonate with a lot of people. You don't have to be special to do special things. Pretty sure I've said that once already, but still. It's not a new concept or anything life-changing on the surface, but it's still an impactful lesson nonetheless. And you don't need to face planet-ending danger to realize that for yourself, even though that had to be the case with these last two guys. But if you don't believe me, just look at a guy like Reigen Arataka. A diamond tier fraud who embodies this very theme in Mob Psycho 100, despite his annoying flaws. But it's these very flaws that drive the point home. See, Reigen grew up with a relatively normal life, getting decent grades and having that youthful ambition to make a difference in the world. And like many of us, as we grow older and life starts slapping us around a bit, that ambition dies down, and Reigen started working as a regular salaryman. However, one day, he becomes fed up with his complacent life, and takes a big risk for once. He quits his job and opens up a psychic business called Spirits and Such Consultation. In a world full of real-life espers, Reigen is a man that lacks in power, but makes up for it with his savviness and charisma. For example, one day in his office, Reigen explains to a client that he has a digital curse from virus-filled porn sites, which is responsible for the stiffness in his shoulders. The client is skeptical, but Reigen performs a massage, leaving the client feeling much better, and is convinced that the quote curse was removed. I mean, it's just that easy for him. Unlike King and Hercule, Reigen embraces his title as a fraud. He knows what he is and isn't capable of, and seems to get by knowing how to read a room and owning it. Well, after Mob doesn't show up to work one day, Reigen goes out to look for him. He tracks Mob's phone using his GPS and takes a cab into the woods, where he finds the base of the 7th Division of Claw. The guards stop him at the front and demand to know why he's there. Reigen remains calm and collected, asking what's going on inside the building, and wondering why he wasn't informed on anything. Continuing further, he asks all the guards there whether they can use psychic powers or not. Getting no answers, Reigen attempts to enter the building, but is stopped by one of the guards. Reigen demands to be let go, and explains that he has work matters to discuss with his subordinates, aka Mob. Based on his behavior and commentary though, they all assume that Reigen is the boss of Claw, and the guard who grabbed Reigen starts to panic, believing he will be killed for his rude behavior. Seeing his panicked state, Reigen tells the other guards to bring him into the break room and chill out. Touched by his kindness, the other guards cheer him on, proudly proclaiming him as their boss. A little later, he even convinces all the guards to leave the organization altogether, and find more fulfilling work. That's just what this man does. He's the master of fake it until you make it. I mean, he's really good at the faking part, not so much the making, since, you know, he has no real powers. However, this briefly changes when Mob grants Reigen his powers. This comes after Mob is pushed to the brink, finding no other choice but to go on a 100% power rampage to take out the remaining Claw members. But Reigen slaps his hands on Mob's face before he can do that. He begs Mob not to fight, knowing that he'd be the one suffering in the end, and explains that there's times when it's okay to run away. Again, knowing how to read the room and knowing your own limitations. Shigeo is deeply moved by his master's words and consideration for his feelings, unintentionally entering 100% gratitude and transferring his energy to Reigen. As this happens, Yusuke Sakurai appears behind Reigen and slashes him across the back, seemingly killing him. Thanks to Mob's energy, however, Reigen is completely fine. He then goes on to straight up embarrass the Claw members, while at the same time calling them kids who never grew up. feeling like they're entitled to respect and admiration just because they have Esper powers. Although technically not true because of the temporary powers he got from Mob, he makes an excellent point. If just a normal guy like him could easily beat them with their supposedly special Esper powers, what does that make them really? Take away the powers and what do you have left? It's the same lesson that he drives into Mob whenever he can. Having incredible power doesn't make you better than anyone else. Although he essentially tricked Mob into working for him as an exorcist, he does still impart some wisdom on the kid from time to time. Now, I'm not going to go through the entirety of Reigen's character arc like I did with the other two, but I do want to talk about a certain point in the story, which was honestly the reason I wanted to make this video in the first place. One day, Reigen pretty much forces Mob to leave his friends to go handle an exorcism. This obviously upsets Mob, and he explains how he has a personal life with friends and not to call him without warning. Reigen responds by saying that his friends at school were fake and only using him. Surprisingly, he sternly said Mob had to abandon his friends because he was the only one who understood him. This really pisses Mob off and he leaves, and for the next few days he doesn't show up to work, making it pretty clear that Reigen's words really got to him. I still kind of question why Reigen acted this way towards Mob in the first place. I mean, he is kind of manipulative at times, but it's never crossed over into controlling or cruel like it did that day. Just out of character for him in my opinion. Regardless of why though, Reigen was left without his exorcist. After realizing that it doesn't seem like he'll be coming back anytime soon, he set out to prove that he could make it on his own by playing to his strengths. He started cleaning up the city while advertising his services. He also filmed the process of an exorcism at haunted places and put them on the internet, offered free classes on how to not be tricked by exorcism frauds, and became a general life coach of sorts to many people, quickly building quite a reputation. He even got invited to be on television, which he quickly accepted. Unfortunately for him though, it ended up being a trap set by a psychic named Jodo, who was out for revenge after Reigen kneed him in the stomach during a previous arc. On the show, Reigen was asked to perform a live exorcism on a possessed kid, and dude pulls out the whole moveset to try and sell it. Well, it turns out the kid wasn't really possessed, and was just acting, exposing him as a con man in front of thousands of people. He was immediately shunned by everyone, and was bombarded with reporters and paparazzi. His reputation and business were in shambles. He had no one. Eventually, he gets pressured into holding a press conference, and an important question gets asked. Why did you get into the psychic business in the first place? This sends him into a flashback of when he worked a regular job. He remembered how bored he was with life, and decided to do the psychic thing on a whim because he thought it was fun, or at least it seemed fun. However, he just ended up becoming a glorified masseuse, and decided to throw in the towel and do something else. But just before he does, Mob shows up looking for advice on how to control his psychic powers, so he thinks of some random advice to give him and sends him on his way. Turns out though that Mob really did have powers, and Reigen saw this as an opportunity to get into some real psychic work for once, and finally make a name for himself. Thinking back on that day, he realizes how much he admired Mob when he first met him, but also how he saw Mob as an opportunity to become special himself. He took advantage of him. And the crazy thing was that he went through the exact same cycle after Mob quit on him. He built a name for himself doing things that fit his strengths and doing it the way only he could, but like the day he met Mob, it just wasn't enough. So he made the stupid decision of going on TV because he wanted more. The same thought he had when he met Mob. He realizes this and looks up at the camera to talk directly to Shigeo. He says he sure has grown up. Mob, who was currently watching the press conference, realizes that it was directed towards him. Suddenly, all the cameras in the conference room start floating, causing the media to immediately believe that Reigen is the real deal, even though in reality, it was Mob using his power secretly. After the press conference, Reigen and Mob meet up, and Reigen asks him if he knew who he really was. Mob responds by saying that he's known from the start. Hearing this, he holds his breath, thinking that Mob's about to call him out as a fraud as well, because that's what he is after all, a fraud. At least that's what he's thinking. But Mob responds by simply saying he always knew that he was a good guy. And with that, Reigen and Mob become friends again. Sure, it's a cookie cutter anime resolution to a conflict, but it made me realize something. That moment when he was waiting for Mob to call him out like the fraud he was, before calling him a kind person, that showed just how much Reigen feared who he thought he really was. And by extension, King and Hercule along with him have the very same fear of being exposed for what they perceive to be not good enough, or a bad person. And this is when it dawned on me. These characters are essentially the personification of impostor syndrome. For those of you that are like me and learn your big words by hearing them on TV and then Googling them later, imposter syndrome is a psychological experience of intellectual and professional fraudulence, despite their actual talent and capabilities. Like, do you ever have those moments when you're in a group of people and feel like everyone around you knows more than you do? Or when you actually win something or succeed in a certain area, you kind of just toss it up to luck? That's imposter syndrome. It stems from the doubt in one's own competence. Sure, these characters may have brought their problems onto themselves, but that's not the point. Because if you look at these characters through the lens that they represent a different flavor of imposter syndrome, their character arcs give us a good look into how we might be able to tackle this phenomena ourselves. King puts on a facade to not disappoint others. Hercule does it to not lose everything he's worked hard to obtain. And Reigen does it to prove that he's more than the boring piece of crap he thinks he is. But through adversity and gaining some self-awareness, these guys come out a lot better for it. And that's something I think we can all learn from. See, remember at the top when I asked you if you ever felt like a fraud? Well, that's a question I thought about myself on more than one occasion. Growing up, I was always a people pleaser. I kind of always just tried blending in with my group of friends, just kind of trying to get by. And it worked out fine for a while. I mean, I've always had friends and eventually became a pretty outgoing person that could start a conversation with pretty much anyone. After all, I thought I just had to mirror that person's personality and interest and then boom, I have a new friend. But the problem was, after going my whole young life as a chameleon pretty much, I never bothered to figure out who I actually was. I felt like no one around me really understood me. I mean, how could they? I don't even understand me. I would live with this constant fear that if people saw me for the boring and untalented person that I was, I wouldn't have anyone left. And I won't lie, I still battle with that at times. But honestly, thanks to anime, I finally feel like I at least have some sort of identity. I've always loved anime my whole life, and thankfully I've been able to make a career out of it. Most of my friends know me as the guy that talks about anime all the time now. And in a way, finally feeling like you have a label on you is kind of comforting. It's kind of like when you lose your phone, and then you find it destroyed because you left it on the ground in a parking lot or something, but you feel better finding it and having it, instead of never finding out where it went even though it's still broken. Alright, maybe a little too specific, but the point is, once I started focusing on the things that interested me, and stopped caring that I was missing some party that night to talk about the latest One Punch Man chapter in my basement, I felt more comfortable in my own skin. I just felt a part of the world finally. I don't know, it's hard to explain even now, but regardless if you find your own label or not, it doesn't really matter. Because the lesson that Reigen, Hercule, and King teaches us is that you shouldn't feel bad that you're not special, because no one really is. And either way, normal people do special things all the time, so you can too. I'm not sharing any mind-blowing information here. I'm sure it's a lesson you've gotten at some point in your life, in one fashion or another, but I hope that a video like this, talking about it through the lens of an anime fan, made the lesson a little bit more digestible. I know we got a little bit emo at the end there, but I hope you enjoyed everything before it, and I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. Let me know if there's any characters you think fit this anime trope better, and I do actually read almost every single comment, so please let me know your comments below. That does it for this video. Thank you so much for watching till the end if you did. I'll be coming out with videos much more frequently from now on, but until then, I'll see you guys in the next video.